welcome to Conrad Morning Musings. I hope everyone is having a good morning. I am, as I often am, caught in the traffic of New York City. Caught in the traffic of New York City. And boy, I have a lot to talk about this morning. So I hope that you are having a good morning. I hope that you are preparing your day to get out to have a good day. Every day that we're in the land of the living is a good day. And more people need to remember that and keep that in mind that, a new day is not by any stretch of the imagination to be taken for granted. We cannot assume that when we lie down at night that we will rise the next day. And so when we do rise, I am one of those that believe that we should be grateful, that gratitude to God, the Most High, gratitude, whatever name you know God by, as we are a pluralistic society, we are an ecumenical and interfaith community. We're Americans, and of course in America there's no state religion, in spite of what some people mistakenly say. There's no such thing as America, the Christian nation. We are not a Christian nation. We are not a Jewish nation. We are not a Hindu nation or Muslim nation. We are a democracy. We're a republic. But we do have perhaps the greatest freedom, religious freedom, of any society in the history of the world. And so people are free to be and practice whatever religion they want. And so I know that people will be listening this morning that are from many different faith traditions, but whatever faith tradition you're a part of, there is a principle, I'm sure, that celebrates God, recognizes the blessing of a new day. And so every single day that I rise, I'm excited. I'm grateful, I'm happy. And I think that's the best prescription in life. Don't wake up and bemoan another day. I've got a lot to talk about today. I want to start out by saying I have been talking to you about Mayor Eric Adams, my continued support for him in New York City. And of course, we found out yesterday that the charges against Mayor Eric Adams have been officially dropped. Yesterday morning, something that we had been anticipating. In fact, I had been anticipating this from the beginning of these charges. I did not believe that there was any merit to these charges. Nothing I heard in the media reports, nothing I heard from the prosecutors indicated to me that there was anything at all that they would ultimately be able to find him guilty on. And of course, after dragging his name through the mud, after implicating him, after making it seem like his conviction was assured and inevitable, making him imperiling him in terms of his ability to campaign, hindering, poof. There's a puff of smoke, and it's all gone. And so today, my dear friend Eric Adams, my friend of over 40 years, no, not 40, but 38 years, he is without charges without the specter of criminality hanging over his head as it has been for the last year. And he's free to decide to run. And he has said yesterday that he will continue to campaign.
Construction reported ahead.
And seek re-election, for which I was very happy to hear. I was pretty certain. But, you know, when you're being sat upon and people are abandoning you, even the strongest of us can sometimes say, is it worth it? But he did say yesterday that he would seek re-election. And then this morning, I heard, and it's in all the news, and it's very exciting, that he says he's going to seek re-election as an independent, as a political independent. And that is particularly exciting news for me. And I think for a lot of people, because I don't know about many of you, but I have become increasingly dissatisfied, increasingly disaffected, increasingly depressed by the direction of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, or the Democrat Party, which is the formal name of the Democrat Party. It's sort of a play on words to call it the Democratic Party. It is sort of this seizing the association with democracy. And I have been increasingly disenchanted with the Democratic Party. It was a party at one time that my grandparents were a part of. It was a party that represented working class people, people who were in the new ascendant middle class, people who were blue collar workers, people who were politically liberal, but people who wanted a better society, people who were generally speaking anti-war, and all of those things have sort of been turned upside down, okay? And the Democratic Party now, which used to be anti-war, has had us in more wars than I can count. In fact, they are as warmongering as the Republicans traditionally have been. They are certainly as warmongering as the neocons. And in fact, on issues like the economy and war, the New World Order, trade deals like NAFTA, which basically shipped all of the production of goods from the United States to Mexico and Canada, much to the detriment of manufacturing workers in the United States. Wall Street bailouts, their obeisance to Wall Street and the financial industry. The Democrats and the Republicans are essentially indistinguishable from that standpoint. And then when you consider the left, the far left, the extreme left, people who don't simply say, I believe something, okay, which in America, we live in a free society. If you say, I believe that this should be, there is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying what you believe. There's nothing wrong with your belief system. If you said, I don't believe in God, there's nothing wrong with that from an American standpoint, from a civil standpoint in America. Just as we have the freedom to practice religion, just as we have the freedom to embrace a religious identity, an American who does not believe in religion or doesn't want to believe in religion has the right to say that. And just as we have the right to promote ideals of faith, either our religious doctrine, our denominational point of view, our moral and ethical point of view, we have the right to articulate that in the world. Similarly, an atheist has that same right. But what I noticed about the left is that they don't say, I don't believe in God. They don't say, I don't believe that we should have religious ideas in the public square. They actually try to say it shouldn't happen. Or worse, you shouldn't believe in religion in the public square. And that is troubling to me. And I don't know about you, but I feel from the left a more groupthink sort of pressure. I think when you talk about the climate change issue, I know that there is some level of climate change, but it's only from the left that I feel that there's a pressure that you must speak a certain way, you must believe a certain way. For if you don't believe, and if you don't check the boxes, and you don't say certain things, we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years that you will be canceled, and that people are not satisfied simply saying they disagree with you, but they're in terms of the left, there are wrong ideas. And that is very problematic to me. The labeling of people who have traditional views or who do not agree with them. If you don't believe that there is an impending doom coming in society, if you do not believe that climate change represents an existential threat to human existence within the next 4 or 5 years, the research you see saying that for at least 40 years. But if you don't believe that, if you don't embrace that, and I have many friends who are on the left, and it's more and more are taking on these sort of extreme left views, and they're not even conscious of it. But if you even express doubt, or if you express some reservation, some nuance of that view, you're a climate changer. You're part of the problem. You're an idiot. And a lot of people on the far left are highly educated people. And let me tell you something. I'm quite educated myself. It's a great trick among the learned to tell you how stupid you are when you don't embrace their theories and hypotheses. Because in academia, that's all academics propose. They propose theories, they propose hypotheses, and they become very adept at arguing their or trying to prove their theory. But often it's not empirical. Often it's not something that can be quantitatively verified. I mean, if you're talking about some scientific experiment, but social scientists can only present their theories. They can present data, but it's often fudged. It's their opinion. It's their writing. And to not agree with them does not make one stupid at all, because all they're doing is arguing a case. It's like an attorney in a courtroom. One attorney says this guy didn't commit murder. The other attorney comes, equally as persuasive and compelling and says, this guy is guilty of murder. That's the way academia works. That's the way journalism works. That's the way punditry works. That's the way government works. But what I noticed from the left is that if you don't agree with them, and they can be literally raising one of the most absurd points, but if you don't agree with them, you're an idiot. And unfortunately, the American people, most folks do not have the wherewithal, the depth or background or research to be able to refute them. And when you have a media that's primarily filled with people from the left, and the Democratic Party becomes more far left, the Democratic Party historically has been center left. There was a spate of losses from Jimmy Carter on to Bill Clinton, from 80 to 92. That 12 years, Bill Clinton became a centrist, not center left, not center right, but centrist, and the Democrats began to win. Barack Obama is really the first left of center Democrat that's won in a long time. And he ran more moderately than he governed. Same with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was elected in 2020 as an alternative to Donald Trump because many people saw him as a political moderate, a political centrist. But of course, Joe Biden's decline had already taken place by the time he was elected. There was a sort of anybody but Trump quality in 2020 to many in the electorate. And Joe Biden's presidency was not the centrist presidency that we expected. Indeed, it was a more left of center presidency. And so what I want to say to you this morning is that as a Democrat, a black man that registered to vote for the first time in 1984, and I registered to vote in 1984 because Reverend Jesse Jackson was running for president. I was very excited about that. It was my introduction to the political process in terms of being an active participant. And I've been a Democrat ever since. That's all I've ever been. Never, ever have I been anything else but a Democrat. And it's not that I feel the Democratic Party is a perfect party. Historically, that's not why I became a Democrat. It's not that I think the Democratic Party is the only party. I don't disrespect black people who are Republicans. I think that there's great merit in having a significant number of black people in the Republican Party. I've been promoting a 70-30 plan for 20 years almost. You know, that if 70% of us are Democrats, 30% at least should be in the Republican Party. So we have coverage no matter who wins. So I don't begrudge people who are Republicans. But I'm just feeling that the Democrats have left me. And when the focus is climate change and not jobs for people, manufacturing, you say, well, if the climate change issue isn't resolved, humanity won't be here. My problem with that is that this is not the first generation to say that. I can show you news footage from 40 years ago. People with the same hue and cry, okay? But the scientists say, you gotta follow the science. You can't be an idiot, a troglodyte. It's very interesting that the people who tell me I have to follow the science on climate change tell me at the same time that there's no such thing as two genders, that gender is a social construct, that there's nothing at all biological in terms of defining gender. Now, this is why the Democrats have left me, because they're not a party of common sense. You got to follow the science on climate change, idiot. You got to follow the science. Well, how many genders are there? Well, there may be thousands, depending on how I feel today. So what happened to follow the science? What happened to follow the science? And so what you find with the Democrats, and the Republicans do the same thing, political parties do this, and ideologues do this, they sort of have a revolving standard for what's right and what's wrong, and they sort of argue conveniently whatever argument fits their narrative at the moment. The problem is most people don't delineate like this. Most people don't say or challenge these political parties, these political leaders. Hey, wait a minute. That doesn't sound consistent. You need to follow the science on climate, but on the gender question, you become extremely abstract, postmodern, where you say there's no objective truth, and basically gender is a construct that can be defined in any way whatsoever. To me, that's complete nonsense, and that's another reason why, many men are leaving the party. It's not that we left as much as the Democratic Party left us. I'm a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and over the last several years, it was a complete disgrace at my alma mater to see the girls of the University of Pennsylvania swim team be shamed into silence, be shamed into accepting a biological male that they knew, their classmate, who all of a sudden decides he wants to identify as a woman, and now they have to not only accept this person on their team, they have to allow this person to change in their locker room, and probably worst of all, women at competing NCAA institutions had to sit idly by and compete against this 6'5" biological male. And Democrats and liberals and the left told all of the American people that we had to accept Will Thomas as Leah Thomas. The NCAA gave in, and to even question it made one intolerant, a bigot, a homophobe, a hater, where people could actually lose their jobs. People could actually be silenced and not even be allowed to make a living simply because their intellectual conclusion, their minds were telling them that there's something inherently wrong with Leah Thomas. If you want to be Leah Thomas, I'll call you Leah Thomas. That's no problem. But that doesn't mean you have the right to declare yourself a woman and then compete in the women's category against biological females and then become the top swimmer in America. And then, of course, these
Estimated time in traffic,
19 minutes.
were tripping over themselves to declare Leah Thomas the female athlete of the year. Because again, gender is a social construct. It's not just like race. Now all of a sudden we're being told that race is a social construct. And again, most of you don't understand postmodernism. When you hear ideas like that, they are not the gospel truth. They are just a part of an ideology that says there's no objective truth. And so you get a clever academics that come up with this language. It's imposed upon young people, and it really is, in your colleges, universities, high schools, secondary schools, elementary schools. It's imposed on young people. It's indoctrinated in them, not presented in the way traditional academic ideas are presented. They're a pro and a con. You argue the affirmative and you argue against an idea. That is the best way to educate people. That's how we were traditionally educated. But today, these ideas are introduced without a critical examination, without critical analysis, without pushback. And the reason why it is imposed without pushback is because they've already created the conditions for which you cannot question it by saying, well, if you do that, you're a racist. Well, if you do that, you're a bigot. And I say that this is why right now there is such a great backlash against DEI. There's going to continue to be a backlash against some of this stuff because Democrats in their far left extreme last 15 years since the advent of Obama have been pushing society further and further left, have been introducing ideas that are more and more ridiculous. And the American people have always resented this. American people have always felt that there was a certain tyranny associated with how they've been made to think and speak in the last 15 to 20 years. And it was inevitable that there would be a backlash. And unfortunately, black leaders, black academics, and black politicians allowed the African-American struggle to be used as a Trojan horse. And now that the backlash comes, a lot of the backlash we're going to also face. I'm saying all that to say that the Democrat Party it's left me. I can't in good conscience say that most of what the Democratic Party stressed in this election is something that I support. I know Donald Trump. I knew the limitations of Donald Trump. I knew the problems that Donald Trump would bring or represent. But you know, when you think about it, most Americans knew Donald Trump. He was not unknown. He had already had one administration. But the majority of Americans said things are so bad and going in such a bad direction, then hey, at least, we won't continue to go in that direction. And I think a lot of people are saying that, particularly men. The Democratic Party has done a great job in incorporating women in leadership, but they've forgotten about men, and that's problematic. People of any race, creed, color, gender, they're going to support who supports them. The sweetest sound to anyone is their own name. If I took a picture of a group and showed it to the group, everybody's scanning for themselves. And so the Democrats' most loyal constituency is black women, no question. For a particular political party, But one thing's for sure, you cannot dispute that the most loyal constituency of Democrats are black women. But right behind them were black men. But it seemed that once the Democrats won, and they won largely because of those 87, 90% black male votes, okay? Along with the women's 90 plus, 96, 98. Okay, those both blocks are really important. For 4 years, the Democrats never said black without saying woman right after it. And they never really say men until late in the campaign when they had a male problem, when they recognized there was a gender in 2020. And then, of course, they get the kind of men that will tell men what they want to say to men, but do not have an authentic message for men. And of course, Obama got in big trouble during the campaign, and black men were slamming him. I mean, the mask came off. Black men who were proud of him, who respected him, but kind of knew he ain't really a brother like we are. His experiences are not like ours, but we were so proud of him that we gave him a pass and a status that he would not ordinarily have had with black men. And then you're gonna lecture us about not supporting Kamala Harris because she's a woman, which was an absurdity, okay? But who are you to tell us who to vote for? Now a book has come out. It's called Fight. And this is the hypocrisy of all politicians, all right? I know that, we loved Obama. I named my son after him. I love the guy. Still love him. I think he did a great service to American history, being the first African-American president. I give him props for that. I think it was very important that young children see the breaking of the ultimate glass ceiling. However, he's a politician, and politicians are hypocrites by nature, by definition. In fact, you really can't be a good, effective politician if you're not capable of looking coldly in the eyes of one group and saying something to them, and then going to another group and coldly looking in their eyes and saying the exact opposite. You won't be a great politician if you can't do that. And even the greatest that we've had, people like Adam Powell, and I love Adam Clayton Powell. He's a great man, but don't be fooled. Powell had a political streak in him that was capable of essentially saying and doing anything. Y.T. Walker said he wasn't James Farmer said he wasn't moral or immoral, he was amoral. And that's basically what most successful politicians are. There are some who are able to maintain their integrity and who don't have such Machiavellian traits, but they're far and few in between. And so this book has come out called Fight, which is really detailing what happened in the aftermath of Joe Biden's complete meltdown in the debate in 2024, and how the Democrats sort of scattered into all of these different camps. And the fact remains that the man that lectured black men, for which he was roundly eviscerated. I mean, brothers, they ripped Obama to shreds. And you ought to just Google some of the irreverent videos that were made about Obama by the brothers, okay? And they said, thank Obama. I mean, you gotta really see it. I mean, and some of them were hilarious, and it also showed how precipitously he had fallen in the eyes of black men when he lectured us about not supporting Kamala Harris. And now this book comes out that he didn't support her. He didn't want her to be the nominee. He wanted Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor of Michigan. And he wanted Wes Moore, if you can believe this book, from Maryland to be the vice president. And that, again, is more of Democratic identity politics. You got to have the right. Okay, so we'll go. I'm black. I've been the president. Okay, Hillary lost. She's a white woman. All right, so we got to get a white woman over the fence. So we'll go. Okay, we got to get a woman president for the first time. Okay, so here's what we do. We'll go with Gretchen Whitmer. Yeah, that's a white woman, and then we got to get a black man to serve as the vice president. That's, again, identity politics. And yes, there's something to inclusion. But when you go crazy and every analysis is based upon identity politics, that's when a party's lost its way. I mean, the Republicans are just as bad in the sense that they feel like no matter how incompetent a white man is, he's always the most qualified. And they also feel that no matter how well qualified a black person is, they're never really, really qualified. So there's a pox on both houses in that regard. One party is so driven by a formatted affirmative action, quota-driven identity politics, and the other party is stuck in the Stone Age in the 30s and 20s and believe that the definition of competency is a square-jawed, rock-jawed, erect-standing white man with gel, slick back hair style with gel. So what do you do? Both parties have a pox on them, and that's why I guess I said all that to say that Mayor Eric Adams' announcement this morning that he's going to run as a political independent. That's very refreshing to me, because I actually have been I've been really, really considering leaving the Democratic Party. And I have really strongly considered that. I have thought about this. I have wrestled with it. I've pushed a 70-30 plan. I've thought about joining the Republican Party, not because the party is what it should be, but I feel that blacks need to get into that party and fight to make that party more responsive. I think the downside of what's happening in America today, in terms of the Republicans and their agenda, and many blacks are uncomfortable with their agenda, but to me, the downside of not having representation or a voice in a party that is likely to win, when they do win, your position, your perspective, your interests are not even considered, because you have eschewed or you have determined that you don't want any part of that party. And so when Donald Trump gets involved in the museums and wants to change the narrative, well, who's there from the black side to say, no, Mr. President, here's why you shouldn't do this? Who's there? All those black government workers in the DMV. Who's there? on the Republican side to argue passionately and persuasively and to raise hell if necessary to protect your interest, because we're all in the Democratic Party. And I've said time and time again, I don't care how smart you think these people are, Jasmine Crockett, Cory Booker, I don't care, Obama, Kamala Harris, I don't care how intelligent you think they are, Jesse Jackson, Cornel West, no, not West, West is a little more imaginative in terms of politics, but all of these folks that keep arguing for you being in the traditional the Democratic Party and all blacks being in it, Roland Martin, all these people, it's child's play. Their intellect, their analysis of the political system it's juvenile. It really juvenile. Like, well, yeah, it is juvenile, but the more baby range than even fifth graders, because it presupposes this absurd notion that all blacks can just gather together one party. All blacks, listen now, can gather together in one party, and when we lose, there will be no consequences, there will be no amelioration of our political power, political gains. There'll be no mitigating of that. When all of us voted for one candidate and we demonize the other, but there'll be no price to pay. And I don't care how many degrees a person has, I don't care how articulate they are, if that is their political calculus, that is akin to an ostrich to avoid the troubles of the world, digging a hole in the sand and putting its head in that hole, thinking the threats will go away simply because the ostrich can't see the threats. And that's basically what the black political leadership continues to double and triple down on. This sort of insane strategy of putting everything, all of their chips, on one roll of the dice. I gotta say this as well. The Democrats have become increasingly consumed with the performative gesture. I'm going to say this very plainly. I am not impressed by politicians on either side of the aisle that cannot observe the decorum that is expected of an elected public official. Now, I do not place politicians in any high, rarefied air. I respect them as citizens who have decided to serve. They're not stars. They're not celebrities. They're not people for us to fawn over or bow down over. They work for us. They are our servants. And we should respect them. I mean, I don't say go into your senator's office and plop your feet up on his desk and say, "What have you done for me lately?" I don't say that you call them out of their names or that you don't show them the courtesy and respect that all people should be entitled to. But why the fawning? Why forget that they work for us? President Trump, pardon me, works for the American people. This is not The Apprentice. This isn't the private sector. He works for us. And we can't forget that. Same is true with Biden. Same is true with Jasmine Crockett. And when President Trump does things that, in my view, are beneath the dignity of his office, it's unbecoming of a politician. It is. I'm sorry. It's unbecoming of anyone in a leadership role when you are unnecessarily rude. I don't mind honest people putting people straight. And I don't want someone that's always structured and politically correct. You know, most politicians, when you say they're polished, you just mean they're good liars, skillful, polished liars. And I'm not impressed by that. So it is refreshing throughout history. People like Adam Powell, who said what they meant and meant what they said. Again, Powell was as political as anybody, but I like to see a politician sometimes stand up and stick it to the man. But I like to see decorum. And when I see people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jasmine Crockett, the same cloth, as far as I'm concerned, I don't want cackling in Congress. I'm sorry, I don't. I don't want. I do not want to hear street corner conversation in Congress. I do not want to hear joning or ranking or snapping or bagging and all of these terms. I don't want to hear playing the dozens and signifying in Congress. It's not impressive to me. And it's not designed to do what legislators are there to do. And that's to hammer out agreements that will benefit the American people. So you don't impress me. You don't impress me with performative acts where you got somebody straight. I told them. That doesn't impress me. Now, if it impresses your people in Houston, God bless you. But I assure you that act, it certainly has gotten old with me. And so I am not impressed, by big mouths, loud mouths. Talk loud, say nothing, and do even less. And that causes me to say another reason why Democrats just don't get it. I watched the other day where Senator Cory Booker, I've known Cory for over 20 years. I like Cory generally. He's a very intelligent person. I met Cory many years ago with Rabbi Shmuley Botiak in his home in New Jersey. And he and Cory at that time were very close. I knew Rabbi Botiak because we did a radio program together on a black station. We did the morning show for a brief time together where we debated ideas, and it was a great show. And we became friends, and I have a great deal of respect for Shmuley, as I call him. I've been in his home. I've had Passover with his family. We don't always agree on everything. Peter Noel, who also is a very good friend, mutual friend, we sometimes disagree. But that's how I met Cory Booker. And of course, he became mayor in Newark, New Jersey, and he fought the political establishment in Newark. And I remember when Raz Baraka was running, or was going to support Sharp James. At the time, I had an organization called Movement for Change, where I was encouraging young candidates to run for office. And I told Raz Baraka, who's the current mayor of the city of Newark, running for governor now, I said, listen, the problem in politics, more than an ideological problem, is the generational divide. I said, now, you'll never beat Sharp James and the machine. I said, but if Corey can beat him, then you automatically become the opposition voice to Corey, and you stand a better chance of beating Cory Booker in Newark than you did Sharp James. That's because Sharp James was Newark. He was old school, but he was Newark. Corey wasn't a Newarker, and much of his using Newark was basically staging. Most of his support came from across the river here in Manhattan. White liberal money supported. He's a creation of the white liberal media. And I thought that Raz had a better chance in a generational duel against Cory Booker than against Sharp James. Well, the other day I watched Cory, in my view, descend further and further into the sort of typical verbose politician, performative. He broke Strom Thurmond's record. He has the distinction of being the longest, of having the longest filibuster in the history of the United States Congress. He broke Strom Thurmond's, I think, 25-hour record, 24 hours. I think Cory won 25 hours. And I watched with utter amazement as Democrats in the well of the Congress and subsequently on MSNBC, CNN, other liberal stations celebrate, woo, cheer this accomplishment of Cory Booker to talk for 25 hours. And I say, yep, that's the problem. It's a problem with Democrats. Everything is performative. Substance is never really the issue. Well, the Democrats need to fight back against Trump. And a blowhard talking for 25 hours, that's your answer. That's what you consider fighting back against Donald Trump. A guy stands in an empty chamber of Congress and speaks for 25 hours. I mean, not to mention the fact that a traditional filibuster is to prevent legislation. Strom Thurmond filibustered to prevent a vote on the 1957 Civil Rights Act. That's what he was doing. That's what he was accomplishing. What vote did Cory Booker stall? What, in substance, did he do in the filibuster? I was at the National Action Network headquarters yesterday at their convention, and I heard 2 or 3 people, I think Joy Reid or others, mention Cory Booker to great applause. And I just looked around the room and I said, okay, and what in substance did that filibuster accomplish? And then I said, okay, yeah, that's right. It's performative, and that counts for a lot in Democratic circles, as long as you're attacking Donald Trump. Now, if you call into question Democratic circles, you call into question Democratic racism, if you call into question the power dynamics in Democratic circles, how blacks are the most loyal voters, but never recipients of the largesse. Now, see, you can't call that into question. Then they say, what's the matter with you? Are you a Trumper? What's the matter with you? Are you a right-winger? Oh, man, I've studied this thing for so long. I have watched these people. I know the games coming and going. I know the hustle, frontward, backwards, and sideways. And the question really is, what are we going to do? And I'm moving very close to divorcing the Democratic Party and becoming a political independent. Mad at me because you weren't mad at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, a duly elected senator from the state of Vermont, the great state of Vermont, where I lived and studied at one point. Yeah, I've been around. And he's a political independent. And more black people are becoming politically independent. I remember when I ran for the state senate and I was running against a Democratic Socialist incumbent. He had already been in office, and I was asked to run 3 months before the election. And in 2020, there was a big case in New York where Democrats had been accused of gerrymandering and excluding Republicans from the congressional districts. And so there was a big court case, and the judge ordered the Democrats to redraw the lines. And so they had to redraw the lines in the middle of an election. So often when I was running, I didn't know where my district ultimately would end up being. And they picked they appointed two primaries for that summer, which was very unusual. And the one primary was the Congress and the state Senate. That's the one I ran in August with Hakeem Jeffries. And the other primary was for the state assembly, and I can't remember. There was another. I don't know. There was another office, but it was very. So I didn't do well in that race. We didn't have enough time, and I should have said no. But I thought it was very important to challenge these Democratic Socialists that have taken over, actually, Central Brooklyn's black community as representatives of the black community. But part of my campaign team was saying to me, well, when you run, say, I'm a real Democrat. I'm a real Democrat, as opposed to a Democratic Socialist. They thought that would appeal to the voters. What I found on the ground as I was shaking hands at subway stations in the community, going door to door, what I found was that black people were saying, I'm through with the Democratic Party. I'm a political independent. I'm not a Democrat, okay? And that's a big change, because when I started in politics in 1984, black people would tell you, I'm a Democrat, my mama was a Democrat, my father was a Democrat, I'm gonna always be a Democrat, and that's just the way it was. And you still have folks like that, but those numbers are decreasing, and more people are trending toward being political independent. So I think it's very interesting that Eric Adams has said, and it's not unprecedented. For those of you who don't know, but in the late 1960s, John Lindsay, who many say was the best mayor in the history of New York, he lost in the Republican primary. Yes, and as liberal as New York is, we've had a lot of Republican mayors, including Giuliani and Bloomberg. But a much more popular Republican mayor was John Lindsay, and he lost the Republican primary 68, 69. He ran as an independent and won. He ran as independent and won. And so the Democrats, obviously, the fix is in. They want Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo name is a big name in Democratic circles in New York, even though Andrew Cuomo resigned in disgrace when he was charged. And I don't know if he's guilty or innocent or not. I have no idea. But I do know this. When you compare and contrast his reaction to Eric Adams' reaction, when Eric Adams was accused, Eric Adams said, "I'm not guilty." He stood, he fought, and today he faces no charges. Cuomo's still in court to the tune of $60 million of taxpayer money, fighting civil lawsuits against women who claim that he sexually abused and, let me just get this right. I don't want to get sued. Sexual misconduct. How about that? That's a catch-all. That's a catch-all term. And so I believe that Eric Adams can win. I believe that because he has the bully pulpit of the mayor's office, he has a platform in which to run. He's got an outstanding record. And New York today is not what it was 15 years ago. I will not try to tell you that it is. But it's certainly not what it was 3.5 years ago after 2 de Blasio administrations. Eric Adams is making a change in this city. A lot more work to do, but things are moving in the right direction. And I think it makes more sense to give this man 4 more years, have 4 more years of working class people being empowered, minorities being empowered, someone that is realistic about the crime issue and not one of these bleeding hearts. See, that's the difference between New York today and in the 70s, in the 60s. You always have had bleeding hearts in New York, okay? New York has always had elements of the far left, but usually they were relegated to the East Village, the West Village, and the Upper West Side. And most other people, well, there are a few areas, Park Slope, Riverdale. There are a few other areas that have been historically liberal, but most New Yorkers are sort of common sense, street savvy people, savvy about real life, common sense. But something's changed. There's a sort of dominant streak of bleeding heart liberals, bleeding heart liberal ideas. It's almost as though Amherst, Massachusetts, or Williamstown, Massachusetts, have sort of superimposed themselves. Ann Arbor, Michigan, maybe. I've never been to Ann Arbor, but strikes me as one of those. Palo Alto. I think Palo Alto is even more conservative than New York City today. Well, whatever your quintessential, Redwoods, California, I have been there. At all of these sort of bleeding heart, and when I say bleeding heart, I guess the best representation of a bleeding heart liberal to me is from the great program All in the Family that used to air on television when I was growing up. It was a story about a meathead Queens guy named Archie Bunker, traditional racist, traditional bigot, intolerant, and he had a daughter who fell in love with a guy he called Meathead, who was sort of a traditional, bleeding heart liberal, never met a cause that he was not fully enthusiastically, never met a homeless person, wasn't a mere victim of society. And I know that many homeless people are victims of a cruel society, and that's a fact, but certainly not all. And that's the problem with a bleeding heart. They're so ideological that they sort of start off with these sort of ideas, or the preposition or the thesis that things are this way because of this, and even in the face of evidence, they won't change from that position. And that's what has happened to New York City. That's where the city council is. That's where the state legislature is in Albany, and quite that's where a lot of recent transplants to New York are. And these are Tesla people. Oh no, I didn't make a mistake. 10 years ago, they were Tesla people. And they told you had to get a Tesla. Now, everybody's mad at Elon. So if you get a Tesla, you're canceled. That's the way they think. And so I reject that. And I've been arguing and, criticizing and actively trying to change things in the party, talking with elected officials. But I think the thing for me, and I think for many other people, is, you know what? Why fight the trend? Why not just register as a political independent and then look at both candidates from each party and vote wherever you like? What does a party affiliation do for me? Well, in New York, it does allow you to vote in the primary. And since New York is so overwhelmingly Democrat, political independents here are somewhat disenfranchised, but we got to change that. Now, that's not going to happen this year, but I am working with some folks to establish open primaries in New York, where people will have a chance to be political independents and participate in open elections, where the party does not control your ability to cast your vote in a meaningful way. And that's some work that I'm involved in right now. And so today is a good day for those of us who support Mayor Adams. He is free of charges today, and he is free to continue to govern the city and also free to go out and campaign. Unfortunately, the judge who knew he had to drop the case, I was in conversations with folks. For whatever reason, they don't like Eric Adams. And they are angry as hell that the charges have been dropped. And they have constantly been in debates with me about the dropping of the charges. Well, the independent lawyer didn't say anything about the merits of the case. Well, it's true. He didn't evaluate the merits of the case, but he did say the case should be dropped with prejudice, that nothing was there, that the case should not be prosecuted. That's the only way I can interpret when a man says the case should be dropped. As far as I'm concerned, when a case is dropped, you're innocent. And I've debated even lawyers on this point. They said, no, you're misinterpreting. Dropping the case is not an exoneration. But they don't know how wrong they are. And here's why they're wrong. When the government said that it's not going to pursue charges against Eric Adams, and the independent attorney that looked at it found no impropriety in terms of no quid pro quo, no reason why the case should not be dropped of Eric Adams. You say, no, it isn't. I say yes, it is. And the reason why it's an exoneration of Eric Adams is that as American citizens, we all have a presumption of innocence. And so even had Eric Adams been indicted, even if Eric Adams had gone through trial, even according to our system, if he's not convicted by a jury of his peers, and we know as black folks that even sometimes when you're convicted, ask the Central Park Five, by a jury of your peers, you can be innocent. But certainly, if you're not convicted of a crime, our laws, our system of government presumes that you are innocent. And so I would say to all of my friends who want to continue to harp on the fact that Eric Adams was not acquitted, Eric Adams, they didn't say that there was nothing there. Well, they don't have to. Because if there are no charges, if there is no prosecution, then the default position that American citizens have in the eyes of the law is that we're presumed innocent. And so Eric Adams, as far as I'm concerned, is innocent of the charges. As far as I'm concerned, Eric Adams is an innocent man that should be left alone so he can go to work and campaign so we can have 4 more years. I hope you've enjoyed this morning's musings. Sometimes I try to be funny. More often than not, I try to challenge you to think and think in ways that you don't ordinarily get challenged to think in, because to me that's extremely important. And so I thank you for listening this morning. Have a productive day, a good day. I certainly will try my best to do the same thing. Until we meet again here on Conversations with Conrad, or Conversations with Conrad's morning or evening musings. Have a nice day.